Good morrow, scholars. Welcome to a new series, I guess. Yeah. I don't know why I always struggle with an intro to a new book. If you have any suggestions of things I could refer to them as, these episodes and various books that I'm reading, I would appreciate it very much. Anyway, I feel a lot better today than I did yesterday, I'm sure. You could probably see it in my face and hear it. And I think a part of it is that I woke up this morning at a pretty early time. I've been really lethargic this last week. But I woke up and I started cleaning, petted some of my animals, fed the turtles. Iggy is being a little obnoxious, but that's nothing new. Anyway, I don't know what I was going for. So I've decided the new book I'm going to read for now. We'll see how long it takes and what I'll read next later, I'm sure. Again, give me your suggestions. I want to be as engaged with the audience as possible. But this is one of the books I mentioned yesterday. It's called Blood of the Dead, Book 1 of the Undead World Trilogy. Again, I do not have the other two. I don't know where to find them just yet. If this does any... ow, my ear. I always wait for the update there to pop up before I do this, and it always waits until I'm in the middle of recording. Anyway, I don't have the other two, and I know I mentioned like the ending was kind of lackluster. It's not that it was lackluster, it's just that, well, you'll see when we get there. But up until that point, I really enjoyed this book. Every time that thing goes off and then my dogs start barking at nothing. I'm sure there's just someone walking outside. Anyway, I probably should have opened to the first chapter before I started this, huh? Oh well. I'm itchy again. Wow, 3 minutes. I almost want to re-record this. Oh well. Joe Bailey, Zombie Hunter, Chapter 1, Page 1. We have about 41 chapters in this book, by the way, and it looks like it's going to be like the last two, and I'll read maybe 2 chapters per video. We'll see. Oh dear. This one's going to be a little bit more graphic than what I'm used to, which is weird considering Twilight was what it was. Anyway. What's the matter, baby? I don't know. Never made love to a zombie before? I don't know why I put on that accent. If you happen to live where that's from, I apologize profusely. Anyway, the man's voice was filled with sarcasm, but looking on from the shadows, Joe Bailey couldn't help but think the guy meant every word, and that he truly did want the girl to mess around with the dead man in front of her. The girl, a blonde of probably 17 or 18, frantically tugged at the iron collar around her neck. Joe knew that getting it off would be impossible. The collar was attached to a long iron rod. On the other end was the guy who wanted to see her come apart at the prospect of defiling herself with the undead. Who knew what they had already done to her before now? What was once an off-yellow dress was mere tatters sagging off of her frame like a torn shower curtain. Her cries were muffled by the band of silver duct tape across her mouth. If that's kept on for too long, don't try and peel it off because it will pull the skin off. You gotta basically dissolve the glue. Sorry. From where Joe lurked off to the side, he could see how her long blonde hair had been pulled forward across her cheeks and stuffed into her mouth to help keep her quiet. I feel sick. I forgot about this. The air stank with booze and dope and the funk of the dead. That sounds like a really awkward 70s parody of zombie movies. I wonder if anybody's done that. The man holding the rod jerked it to the right and left, whipping the girl side to side as he steered her toward the dead man across the basement floor. 4 of his friends looked on, yipping and cheering. All 5 men were eager for what was about to happen. 3 were on one side of the room, including the man holding the pole. 2 were across the way, both gripping a similar iron pole. This one was attached to another collar, one clamped around the neck of an overweight, gray-skinned man with a blood-stained white shirt, brown dress pants, and only one shoe. The fat man, Joe supposed, had probably been a hard worker when he was alive. Though he was now dead, but somehow back to life, he still carried a look of innocence in his eyes, a look of pleading behind the rage and mindless hunger that consumed him. Huh, that's interesting. The jerks cackled and cheered and stepped closer as their buddy forced the girl toward the monster, the dead man trying to step forward with arms outstretched, wanting to grab her. The 2 guys holding the zombie at bay fought with each other, with each tug against the pole. It was a wonder the zombie didn't spin around and take those guys out in an effort to break free. Then again, intelligence was never in a zombie's favor. Joe had been around them long enough to know that much. Joe remained in the shadows behind an old furnace off to the side. The creeps holding the girl hadn't heard him break in through the front floor window of the house and sneak down the stairs into the shadows, each too consumed with the idea of bringing this girl to the edge of torment and despair, before finally shoving her off the edge. "Come on, girly girl. It ain't so bad." I like that I gave him a different accent. Her captor said, "The dude's just hungry, that's all. You know as well as I do that they need to eat now and then, just like anyone else." The girl's muffled screams, grunts, and heavy breathing through her nose sent a shockwave of apprehension through the air. The guy holding the iron rod shook off his beaten leather jacket, first his right arm, then, after switching his hold on the rod to the other hand, his left. He wore a blue t-shirt, one which reminded Joe of what the sky used to look like before it had permanently clouded over in a sickly mix of gray and brown. I can't really sing, and I'm not really sure how this would be said, so I'm just gonna say, woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Sorry. Blue t-shirt sang, 1, 2, the dead's comin' for you. What's that from? I know it's a reference to something. I kinda wanna say they're coming to get you, Barbara. Because I've seen that movie. And I feel like... Is it A Nightmare on Elm Street? I stepped on my glasses and kicked the glass over here out this morning. Anyway. The girl screeched behind her gag. Blue's friends howled. They shoved each other playfully like drunks. "Ready, Betty?" Blue asked. If Betty was the girl's real name or not, Joe did not know, nor, right now, care. He cursed himself for sitting in the shadows so long, having to watch as Betty inched toward her doom. But if he didn't time this just right, neither he nor she would make it out of here alive. You didn't have to be paranoid to know that each of the men were packing heat, something that had become commonplace once the dead had taken over. The zombie snarled, and a gob of bloody spit spilled from the corner of his mouth. It violently lurched forward, catching the men holding the iron rod off guard. A muffled pop came from the zombie's neck. It had broken it from the force of the pull, and it still kept moving. The man holding it at bay yanked back on the rod, jerking the dead man back a step. The zombie grunted, but kept his feet firmly planted, so it only leaned back against the air at an impossible angle before tugging itself upright again. The dudes holding the rod lost their grip, and the second iron rod clanged against the concrete floor. The girl screamed, muffled and scared. "You idiots!" Blue shouted. Sorry. Indecisiveness flashed across his eyes. He wasn't sure what to do. Joe pulled the large X09, I don't know, to shoulder height, cocked the enormous hammer, and got ready. As was his custom, he counted to 3, then kissed the tip of the thick barrel before settling his finger around the trigger. One cock of the hammer was good for 2 shots. He had designed the X09 himself, a large handgun, black and smooth, with a western flare that packed more punch than a double-barreled shotgun. Would that be possible? And if so, how strong would you have to be to avoid, hurting yourself terribly from the kickback? He could have made a fortune off of it if the world was the way it used to be, but those days were gone. The zombie scrambled toward the girl. She veered to the side and breathed a shrill wheeze when the caller stopped her stride. Blue yanked her back and then threw her and the pole into the zombie. He and his buddy spun around and ran for the long flight of basement stairs. Joe jumped out from behind the furnace, aimed at 2 of the yahoos scrambling up the steps in front of Blue, and then sent a bullet into each of their backs. The sounds of the double gunshot froze Blue in his tracks, and by the time he turned around to see the source of fire, Joe had already cocked the hammer again and had the barrel aimed between Blue's eyes. "What the?" Blue started. He was cut off when the girl shrieked and the zombie, who was now on top of her, growled. "Me or her? What's it gonna be, Hero Man?" Both, Joe said, and pulled the trigger. A blood-red hole the size of a quarter sprang to life at the center of Blue's forehead, the back of his head spraying outward in a rain of flesh and bone. Still gazing at Joe, the dude dropped to his knees, then toppled face first onto the floor. Faced or face? I don't know what I said. Joe turned and dove to the side as the 2 guys who had earlier held the zombie at bay aimed their pistols at him and fired. He pulled the trigger in midair, sending a bullet into the zombie's back, the impact forceful enough to send the dead man flying off the girl and to the side. A numbing bang rocked Joe's shoulder when he hit the ground. Fortunately, the long, brown rain-ruined Swede trench coat he wore was padded top to bottom, so the pain wasn't as sharp as it should have been. He cocked the hammer. The girl rolled onto her side and tried to get up, but the awkwardness of her neck collar and attached poles screwed up her balance, and she fell back down, landing on her stomach and face. The 2 men with pistols opened fire. Joe sent off 2 shots, tagging each of them in the heart. Their chests exploded almost simultaneously in a burst of blood, and they hit the floor. The zombie rushed on all 4s and tackled the girl, slamming its forehead into the back of her skull. She lay there, still. Joe got to his feet, cocked the hammer, and took 3 huge strides over to it. He yanked the dead man up by the collar. The creature turned its head toward him, its bloodshot eyes filled with malice. It reached for Joe's arm. Joe pulled the trigger. I used to know someone named Joe. The shot took off the top of the dead man's head, everything from the eyebrows up. The syrupy splash of brain matter and the soft sound of bone hitting the concrete followed right behind. Now no longer moving, the dead man's body suddenly weighed a ton, and Joe needed both hands to dump it off to the side. He got down on his knees beside the girl and checked her neck for a pulse. It was there, still frantic from the ordeal. He turned her over and grimaced at the sight of her bloody face, a deep gouge caused by teeth on her left cheekbone. I'm just going to say curses, he muttered. Her tear-stained eyes opened slowly, then rolled back in their sockets. When they rolled forward again, a soft smile rose on her face. "Thanks," she whispered. Joe stood, sighed, and aimed the gun between her eyes. "You're welcome." That's sad, huh? Okay. That took a really long time. Anyway, Chapter 2. Billy Friday, Punk Girl. Where were you when it all began? The words had sat on Billy Friday's computer screen for the better part of an hour, and, try as she might, she couldn't quite figure out what to say next. How could she? How could anyone describe the transition between blue skies and sunny days to a world of perpetual gray and a moon that never shone? Oh, that'd be sad. I just saw the moon last night and the night before, and it looked amazing. Sorry. How could someone describe graduating from high school with hope and promise, a planned life of being a veterinarian by day and a DJ by night, to going into hiding and secreting yourself away from legions of the walking dead? This is pointless, Billy said, and shoved her thick-framed glasses up further on her nose. The goal had been to write a letter, a short one, something she could print, then copy, and distribute to the lingering survivors of the human race. A letter asking them to stop and reflect on where they had been before the devastation began. The hope being to urge them to continue living, continue surviving, in a world gone awry and where the notion of a normal life was nothing more than a far-fetched, I like that Pokemon, dream. She was to do only one thing with her life, one thing that made a difference. If she was to do only one thing with her life, one thing that made a difference, this would be it. Face it, girl, you've got no class, no style. If you did, you'd be able to write this thing, no problem. I also have this problem. She glanced over the small, standing mirror beside her computer monitor. The girl staring back was but a shadow of the one she'd known in a life that ended a year ago. Her bob-cut pink hair, normally a perfect sphere around her head, sat in disarray. The bags under her eyes were so big that they hung below the frames of her glasses. Yet, she supposed, she shouldn't look any different. Anybody stuck hiding out in the bottom corner suite of an abandoned apartment building would look the same. Fortunately for her, the power was still up in this part of Winnipeg. Ah, that was in World War Z. A survivor from there. Where was I? The suburb, north, Kildonan. I don't know. Kildonan? Dubbed by those who lived there as the Haven, had become a secret safe area for those trying to piece together some semblance of a regular life. She only knew of a handful of living souls in this part of the city, and they had a rule about not interacting with one another. Each person to their own abode, unless there was an emergency. If they had joined together and formed some kind of communal living arrangement, and if they were discovered by the undead, they'd most likely be wiped out. This way, being scattered, if something did happen, the losses would be minimal. Hopefully only a single casualty, and therefore only a single person added to the undead's number. Given the rate of the undead's multiplication, this was a good thing. How do you feel about that? I don't know how I feel about that. Well, I mean, I know how I feel about that, but I understand that thought process. But at the same time, I feel like that's such a waste. I'm gonna have to do a video on that. Let me know if you'd be interested. Pros and cons of this and that. Where was I? From what she could tell, from the bit she caught on the internet, the situation was similar worldwide. Pockets of people hid out here and there, communicating via message boards and news lists and email. Thankfully, the zombies were, frankly, idiots, so there was no fear they'd learn of the survivors' whereabouts or what plans were in motion to try and overcome the army of the dead. Where were you when it all began? There were those words again. Billy remembered exactly where she was. It had been the last day of high school, the excitement of prom night, which I never went to, hovering on the air. The only damper to the feeling was the thought of squeezing into a formal dress, something she'd hated as far back as she could remember. No date, just her and some friends, ones she'd known since elementary school. I don't have that. The closest would be me and Miga. We've known each other since middle school. And not even all of middle school. It was just the 1 year, and then I transferred. And then we found each other again when he somehow ended up dating my sister. Weird, right? Anyway. How could he... Never mind. If you'd like to hate on him, I will put a link in the description of this or the next set of videos I do, so let me know. He has a channel also. Where was I? It had been late afternoon, and school had just let out. The sudden relief of having made it through 12 years of schooling, 15 if she counted her 2 years of preschool and 1 of kindergarten. That was me. I went to a private preschool. I don't know how, though. We didn't have any money. I was gifted. Where was I? Lifted her heart and melted the stress and weight that had plagued her all year as she studied her butt off so she'd one day be accepted one province over into the University of Saskatchewan. How do you pronounce that? Western College of Veterinary Medicine. Is that a real school? As always, she made her way home alone, a walk she looked forward to every day, a chance to unwind and plan her evening, and, as always, the plan was to get home, make a tall glass of chocolate milk, and hide in her room so she wouldn't have to face her parents when they returned from work. It wasn't that she hated them, but she was tired of hearing from them day in and day out that she should quit dyeing her hair, though during the school year, as per school rules, she had to dye it natural colors, which then led to her dyeing her hair white and raising a ruckus with the principal and teachers. "Hey, white is a natural color," she told Mr. Landon. "Only if you're 80, he shot back. Stop listening to Green Day and that devil music. Sounds like... It sounds like something my sister would do. And for once, just once, tie her shoelaces before leaving the house." She also wanted to avoid her geeky sister, who had always sided with her parents. Audrey took the same path home, but whether her sister was ahead of her or behind, she did not know. Taking a deep breath, she stopped her stride when the air shifted and suddenly grew heavier. "Now it's going to rain, and guess who's going to be stuck in it," she muttered. With each step, the air grew thicker and thicker, the smell no longer that of clean earth and green trees and grass, but something off. Like the kind of smell that surfaced when you swore you just passed a BFI bin, but there was nothing there. What is that? I'm going to look that up when I'm done with the video. Anyway. Where was I? That's when the clouds rolled in, dark and gray, thick and dense, threatening to dump blinding sheets of rain. For a long time, the sounds hovered there, taunting the earth. Did I say sounds? Clouds. Clouds? I don't know. Taunting the earth. On the opposite sidewalk, others walking home kept glancing up as well, everyone bracing for a storm. Then a drop fell and landed on Billy's hand. The droplet was warm and gray, like paint mixed with water. "What the?" she said, glancing up. The rain was a drizzle at first, tiny, spiky gray pellets falling from above. Those across the way squealed and stopped walking, checking themselves over as the rain dyed their clothes dark gray. Panicking, Billy ran and shoved her way through a group of kids further up the sidewalk. The rain picked up, and soon thick, sticky drops of gray doused her clothes and blanketed the street and sidewalk, hindering all visibility. "Keep going straight," she told herself, mouth clamped shut for fear of accidentally imbibing? I don't know. Whatever this gross liquid was. Here's a fun little thing you should try and do. Find like an open field, someplace that's very flat and nothing for you to trip on. Close your eyes. And you probably should go with at least one other person, but close your eyes and just walk forward in a straight line and see how well you do. Where was I? A group of teenagers was running down the sidewalk up ahead. Sprinting, she quickly caught up with them. They must have heard her coming from behind, because when she veered to the right to avoid crashing into them, they tried moving out of the way and went to the right as well. Billy smashed into a heavy-set redhead. Instead of banging shoulders and running past her like she expected, the redhead went limp on impact and toppled to the ground. One of the redhead's friends stopped to try and help her up. Billy and the others kept running, but guilt quickly smacked Billy's heart. She knew the right thing to do would be to turn around and see if the redhead was all right. When she spun around, she could no longer see them. The sheet of odoriferous gray rain coming down so thick that it was like trying to find your way around in a steam room. Great, now they're gone and I... Boom! Her feet smacked into something and she tumbled over, her elbows skidding across the grass as she broke her fall, her skin stinging. Soaked to the bone in this funky gray substance, Billy looked over her shoulder and saw the bodies of the redhead and her friend lying there. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked. No answer. She crawled over to them and shook them. "Hey, wake up. Let's go." Nothing. The redhead lay face down. The other was face down too. She rolled the redhead's friend over. Her breath caught in her throat. It was her sister. "Audrey!" she screamed with slippery hands, pawed at her sister's face, trying to wipe away the gray slick covering it. She hadn't recognized her earlier, not with the liquid gray coming down. Audrey lay there, unmoving. Crying, Billy scooped her hands under her sister's small body and, squatting beside her, set her feet up against Audrey's side, ready to lift her. Audrey coughed. "Audrey, thank goodness," Billy shouted. Her sister coughed again, then belched and threw up a nasty mix of puke and blood. It splashed onto Billy's hand and arm, but she didn't care. Her sister was all right. I'm not really good at foreshadowing. "Come on, I'm getting you to a hospital." She pulled her hands up from under her sister and stood. "Help! Somebody help!" Screams broke through the sound of pouring rain in reply. Others called out for help as well. "Help, please, somebody." To her sister, "It's going to be okay, Audrey. It's going to be..." Her sister remained on the ground, eyes wide and white, the pupils and irises gone. Audrey, unblinking despite the fierce rain, stood slowly and started ambling toward her. Billy took a step back, then another, then another. The redhead convulsed once, coughed, and puked up a similar wad of blood and mucus. She too slowly got to her feet and started moving toward Billy. The redhead bumped into Audrey. Audrey didn't flinch as the redhead walked past. What's happening? What's happening?" Billy kept moving back and stopped when she bumped into something. Turning around, she saw that something was another student, a black guy around 6 feet tall. His eyes were solid white. The gray rain poured down. Billy darted away from him and tore through the thick gray droplets, not caring where she'd end up other than away from whatever had become of her sister, the redhead, and that one guy. Home. She had to get home. The ground went uneven beneath her, and she knew she was running on grass. Then the ground dropped as she ran over the curb. Her foot folded beneath her, and she hit the slick pavement. Ow! She scrambled to her feet and tried running again, but had to settle for a limpy jog as her left foot refused to land flat on the ground, the pain in her ankle simultaneously sharp and hollow. I hate that feeling. "Someone! Help!" she managed between rain-soaked gasps. Shadows in the rain, just up ahead. "Hey! Over here!" she screamed. The shadows turned to face her, but didn't run toward her like she had hoped. She kept on toward them, wondering what she'd say when she met up with whoever it was, and how she'd describe the sudden change in appearance of her sister and the others. With each footfall, she chanted her sister's name, a part of her wanting to go back to try and save her, another part scared to death of going near her. The shadows grew larger, and soon 5 people appeared, 2 adults and 3 kids, all gray and wet. The adult woman walked toward her and raised a hand, reaching out to her. The man walking beside her did the same. Then the kids followed their parents' example and stumbled toward Billy, their arms raised, some shoulder height, others only up to their folks' stomach. A sharp ache in her lungs, and Billy skidded to a stop when she noticed these people had white eyes too. Breaking down, she forced herself to wipe the tears from her eyes, turned to the left and ran away. She ran forever. She didn't know how much time had passed until 3 shadows appeared against the rain. Wheezing, she stopped, but put her hands on her knees and tried to catch her breath. You have to extend your midsection, stand upright, and take in a deep breath slowly, and then exhale slowly. If you do that, you're just cutting off the amount of air you can actually take in. Anyway. Sorry. But hey, if you get chased, it might save your life. Where was I? Only now was she able to taste the salt of this bizarre rain on her tongue, spitting it out, hoping it wouldn't make her sick or do to her what it had done to her sister. She tried calling out to the 3 shadows. Only a small squeak escaped her lips. Take it, Bronte. Where was I? Audrey emerged from the rain, as did the redhead and the tall black guy. The 3 walked at the same pace toward her, their footing weak and unsure. Head dizzy from the exertion, Billy knew she was supposed to be doing something right now, but wasn't sure what. It involved movement, but what kind? What was she supposed to do? Her head ached from crying, the running, the frantic breaths of fear. Run! But it was too late. Audrey picked up speed and grabbed hold of her while the other 2 kids with white eyes looked on. Her sister held her in a bear hug. With rubbery arms, Billy tried to push her away, but Audrey was too strong. Her sister's steps were feeble, and at some point in the struggle, Billy tripped over Audrey's feet. A spike of pain shot through her already tender ankle. She fell to the pavement. Audrey jumped on top of her, her weight uncontrolled. Dead weight. What are you doing? What are you doing? Get off! Billy shouted. Audrey reached for Billy's neck. It was impossible to shove her sister's hands and arms away. Her hands kept sliding off Audrey's rain-slicked skin. Thunder boomed, and for a moment Audrey seemed distracted. Billy torqued her body toward the side, but Audrey quickly snapped her back into place on her back, helpless. Tears distorted Billy's vision, turning Audrey's gray face, with red lips and blood dripping down her chin, into some kind of funhouse mosaic. Her sister dipped forward and set a pair of blood-soaked lips on her neck. Billy tried to push her off, but couldn't. What? I feel like I missed something. Teeth. Audrey's teeth pressed against her skin. Something hard poked Billy's leg. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pen. She'd never forget the sound of the pen's tip puncturing the back of Audrey's neck. She'd never forget the block of ice that settled in her stomach when she withdrew it and jammed it into Audrey's ear. She'd never forget the look on her sister's face when she managed to push the head far enough away from her neck, then off to the side. Anger. Billy couldn't remember what had happened next, just the sense of freedom from being out from under the weight of her sister's body, and the joy of leaving the other 2 wide-eyed people behind. But she'd never forget that rain. It lasted for a week. Okay. That ended up being a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. Although, honestly, I'm not that surprised because, as you can see, it's kind of a tall book. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought. I forgot about the beginning. I'll see how how much each chapter is before I start reading next time. That way I can better plan how long these videos will be. If you would prefer like one chapter, I guess one point of view, yeah, one chapter per video, Let me know in the comments, or if you'd prefer 2. I'm sure they'd all end up being about this length anyhow, with 2 per video. And I can do that too. I'll just try and wake up a little bit earlier and get everything ready. Anywho, the next one is going to be Survive the Night. Oh, I just noticed I didn't read the back for this one. Oh well. I think that's a good introduction anyway. Okay, this one is a bit more, I won't say adult, but it deals with a lot more graphic things. Nothing like that. No, that's not what I meant. It's just, well, you'll see when we get there. Anyhow, until next time, goodbye everybody, and I hope you don't mind my rambling, even though I know a lot of you do.